The Shores of Sorrow.
1942. British forces attempt to invade Nazi-held France. However, their plans fail miserably, and a large amount of casualties take place. Since then, Allied forces have planned to return to the European continent.
There was a larger debate over who should be the commanding officer. After much argument, Allied leaders chose Dwight D. Eisenhower, the future President of the United States, to lead and organize the forces that would eventually go into battle. However, most commanders were British leaders and generals. This was due to political sensitivities.
In the first 24 hours of planning, this overdue invasion called for the greatest amphibious assault in the history of mankind. There were two theorized plans that arose from the United States and Britain. Codenamed Roundup, this plan called for amphibious assault across the English Channel, only after continuous bombings to the coast to slow the Germans from massing their power.
The other plan, codenamed Bolero, called for a 1,000,000-man force to cross the English Channel and plague the beaches of France and work their way towards Germany. In the end, the Americans' plan would prevail. The following months were spent in meetings across Britain, perfecting the plan of what was known as Bolero. After all the modifications to Bolero, the Allied planners came up with an operation that came to be known as Overlord.
The year that followed was used for the mere purpose of training the 3 million soldier force that would participate in the invasion. Entire days were spent training these soldiers. These sessions took as long as 6 days a week. Although the Allied planners believed the invasion would take place in 1943, they soon realized this would not give them enough time to organize and train the soldiers adequately. Therefore, the invasion was postponed until 1944. Operation Overlord called for an invasion across the English Channel. The ships would then land on the northern coast of France in the city of Normandy. The force was meant to land on the Atlantic Wall, which consisted of 5 separate beaches: Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword, and finally Omaha.
D-Day, June 6, 1944.
The hours before the 5,000 ships were to land on the beaches, bombers deployed their thousands of paratroopers to assist the soldiers on the beaches. After that, bombers would deploy their 500,000 tons of explosives on the beaches. However, because of the heavy cloud cover, they waited only 3 seconds after they were supposed to. Because of this small error, most of the explosives landed on nothing but fields. There were 5,000 ships of almost every kind that were to land on the 5 beaches.
There was also a crucial piece of land called Point du Hoc. This was a piece of land in between Utah and Omaha Beach. It was a 100-foot cliff which had 6 150mm cannons which could wreck the landings on the rest of the beaches. Specialized rangers climbed these treacherous cliffs under heavy German resistance from above. The rangers shot harpoon rockets which trailed ladders which they then climbed. On the climb, 13 rangers lost their lives due to German resistance.
When they got to the top, they saw that the Germans had left. They took off the camouflage on the cannons and saw that the Germans had disguised telephone poles as cannons to fool the Allies. A soldier saw tank tracks coming from the south, and the rest of the Rangers followed them. There, they found the 6 cannons they were looking for. They neutralized the cannons and took over Point du Hoc. In the meantime, forces had split up into 5 beaches. Their goal was to establish a beachhead at each of those 5 beaches.
Utah, which was the Americans' beach, was taken easier than expected. There were incredibly few casualties. The beachhead was easily established because there was very few German resistance. The belief is that all those German defenses were assigned to Omaha Beach, although this has not been confirmed.
Next was Britain's Gold Beach. This was also taken easier than expected and also had very few casualties. After they established the beachhead, the majority of the soldiers moved towards a rendezvous point to the south of the beach. Juno, which was the Canadians' beach, was difficult, and many lives were lost. However, the beachhead was also established. Afterwards, the remaining forces moved to the rendezvous point, and there met up with the rest of the beaches.
Sword Beach was slightly more difficult, but the objectives were completed without any irreversible difficulties. However, Omaha was much different.
On Omaha Beach, there was much more German resistance than expected, and there was not a sufficient amount of soldiers there to fight back adequately. The original plan for this particular beach went completely haywire. However, all was not lost. After about 1 or 2 hours of losing lives on the beach, small groups of brave soldiers teamed together to take a stand. These groups evaded the heavy German machine gun fire and got past the beach obstacles to get to firm ground. There, they decided to overtake the machine guns and neutralize ground forces. As the hours passed, the American forces overtook the German resistance and finally established the beachhead they needed.
However, there were many casualties, and there were reports that the beach literally ran red. Afterwards, of course, the remaining soldiers moved towards the rendezvous point as the other beaches had done. The D-Day objectives were to blast through the German resistance that had gripped France, then move towards Germany to hopefully end the Nazi regime. Aside all the bloodshed, the Allies were able to break through the heavy German resistance and move their way to Germany. When they got to Germany, the Allies found even more resistance than they had expected, the same way they had done in the beaches in Normandy.
The Russians had been fighting without relief in the east, but were finally able to assist the rest of the Allied forces, because the D-Day invasion had relieved them of the pressure of war. In Germany, however, the Allies were quickly losing people due to German resistance. When the Russians came to assist them, the war was finally overturned, and 1 year later was completely ended. The Jews in the concentration camps throughout Europe were released, and the Nazis were put in camps as a punishment. The conflict with Japan was also ended with an atom bomb that was detonated over Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
If it had not been for this great invasion, the war would have probably not been overturned as quickly. There also might have been much more bloodshed throughout the world. No one knows what would have happened if it had not been for the battles of Normandy. For this, the D-Day invasion is considered a great victory. However, this invasion is mainly a horrible loss because of all the people that lost their lives that day defending the freedom of the human race. This has been dedicated to all those who have lost their lives serving our country in the many tragic conflicts that have taken place.